Morning, everyone. Really lovely to see you all. And I've caught up with you individually and heard how you're getting on. So I hope that we will be able to share some of those things with each other this morning. Really, the purpose is for Flux to support in some way during this pandemic, that we can offer a space for people to do some creative thinking, but also to offer empathy to each other when we're all going through quite similar things around the lockdown, and particularly with your businesses all operating in the same space. I can imagine you might experience similar frustrations, of which empathy is always supportive to. In terms of how we'll kind of work, we can quite use a free-form kind of way of talking throughout the session. So feel free that you can jump in and keep it as natural as we can. So to start, maybe we have an intention setting sort of moment where we just offer what we think we can bring into the space individually, and also maybe what we need at the moment that we might be able to get from the group. So I don't know if maybe we want to take either a moment to think about it and type it into the chat, if you prefer to think kind of freely on your own for a moment, or if you want to just go ahead and share what comes to you. I can offer mine first to kick us off. So I would like to offer a safe and creative space to think freely from the other things and the distractions that you'll be contending with after this. And I'd also like to get from the group a sense of connection with you all, because I'm really fascinated and inspired by a lot of the work you do, but equally I'm feeling a little bit self-isolated on lockdown. So I'm looking forward to enjoying that sense of connection with you.
Good. But I think the thing we're all learning is new it. Sorry, Jonathan.
Have we got a normal running order on this?
Let's create a thinking circle. So shall we go John, Vicki, Chris, and back in that loop? Does that suit you?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said there, Lucy, I would share with. I think one thing that we are all missing is the physical interaction. Up until 2 weeks ago, I'd never used Zoom, and it's forced us all into this environment where previously, being very British, we were always uncomfortable about doing these FaceTime calls. But I think this is something that will certainly persist and be a very useful tool for our organisation, because we are naturally quite disparate, a small team of 7 working in 7 different locations. So I think sharing ideas with colleagues in the sector. Vicki and I had an introductory call early in the week. Chris and I have met on a few occasions. So I think great for minds in the same sector to virtually get together, share the challenges that we're facing. And I think we're all focused on being able to get through this, and really importantly, come out the other side in good shape, ready for the increased challenges that there will inevitably be.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think I mentioned this earlier. I definitely bring honesty, openness, a sense of what I'm finding hard as well as what's working. I think what I'm really keen to start doing is that a space for that longer term thinking about when we go back into prisons, what kind of environments will we be going back into, what the challenges might be, and the opportunities to do something different. And I think anything that helps get the cogs whirring on that is really, really helpful for me, and helpful for the team, because my responsibility to keep people motivated, focused, and optimistic that despite what's going on, we've got a really, really important mission. So yeah, that any space that helps me do that would be really great.
Yes, and again, like John, I hadn't used Zoom before. I actually wasn't very good at working at home either. I'd always be distracted, go off for a bike ride or cut the lawn. So I can probably count the amount of days I've worked at home on one hand in the last 30 years. But it's changing the way we're doing things. I mean, coming from the hospitality industry, communication is absolutely key, and it's nearly always done face to face, and it's quite often done around a table with a knife and fork and a glass, which is probably how I spend quite a lot of my time. I actually be at home, make your own coffee and make your own tea, and also try and do the day job. It's been quite a steep learning curve. But I think communications still is the absolute key with everything, and just like Vicki says, reassuring the staff who are very uncertain about being furloughed, encouraging the ones that are still working, but also talking to our funders as well, and really, like I say, we could be open and honest with them and say, look, this is where we are. We've done lots of financial modelling. We know how many months we're okay with our reserves. But then there may be a conversation later in the year, if this goes on, going to funders saying, we have some money with specific requests attached to it, but would you be happy to take those requests off so we can use it for core funding? Because actually our most valuable asset is our employees, who take 9 to 12 months to train up to work in that environment with their prison knowledge, but also delivering the training and the education. And then just thinking about what it's going to be like when we go back. Will restaurants be allowed to open? Will they be able to have that many people? Our 220 men and women that were halfway through their training courses may have either been released or transferred to different prisons. So we really do think it'll be starting from scratch again with our cohort.
Okay, well, thank you. There's some reflections already there. I'm wondering if we can direct our focus to maybe what we have found has been our key challenge, and perhaps, Chris, around that sense of face-to-face communication, that's been a key challenge for you. I'm just wondering, perhaps if we go in the same sequence, John, over the last few weeks, what would you say has been your most significant challenge that you've faced running Trailblazers?
I think it was important that we delivered certainty for our staff, for our mentees in custody, and indeed our volunteers, some of whom are, older generation. So I think supporting mentees remotely has been the biggest challenge. We've expanded the use of email a prisoner, which I'm sure Chris and Vicki are familiar with. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Oh, okay. So
we've become familiar in the last 2 weeks.
Right. So it is a platform. I'm not actually sure who runs it, but it's a platform, a secure platform where you can email through the platform to a prisoner. That email is received by the prison, it's printed, it's given to the prisoner. He or she can then handwrite a reply, and that reply is then scanned and sent back to the sender. And the sender can pay for the reply, so there's no cost to the prisoner.
Right.
And I think it's about, going from memory here, it's about 40p to send the email and 20p for the reply, something like that. So you load your account with credit, and then you can do it. You need obviously the prisoner's number, and so all of our mentors who didn't have access to it, we've shared the links for them. It's an allowable expense for our mentors to do it. Indeed, our project managers, who are no longer face-to-face, are using that. Also at Brinsford, they've agreed, the prison have agreed that if prisoners want to have our mentors and the project managers' phone numbers put onto their pins, they can do so. All prisons are giving extra money for the prisoners' phone credits. And if need be, we will, if there's a system to do so, we would support our mentees' phone credits. I don't know yet if there's a method for doing that. The other biggest challenge, and Chris touched on it, is guys who are coming up for release and those who have been released. It's really tough when people release from prison anyway, let alone into the environment now. So we have been, where those guys don't have anyone to collect them, which all too often that can happen anyway, but in the current circumstances, people might not be able to do it. We've arranged Uber to sort of meet them at the prison and take them to their first probation meeting and perhaps onto their housing meeting. Where we can, we are supplying them post-release, I must stress, phones, so that they've got a means of communication. You can buy a phone from Carphone Warehouse or whatever for £12 with £10 credit on it. I think you then have to buy another £10 credit to activate the phone. But that's a relatively small investment to give these guys a means of communicating in what's a very difficult world. And we've also been using the supermarket vouchers, which, as I understand, my service delivery director is dealing with that, but they are set up so they can't be used to purchase alcohol or cigarettes. You can only redeem them against food. So, and the other challenge is, very briefly, so I'm going on a bit long here, is ensuring the mental well-being of my team, transitioning them to working from home. I'm very used to working from home. This is my normal anyway. And making sure that they feel safe and secure in their environment and indeed the work that we're doing. We've not had to furlough staff as it stands, but then we have a very small team and there's plenty for them still to do.
Thanks, John. That's really awesome to hear, and you know, can really appreciate those challenges. I'm sure perhaps if Vicki wants to go next, you might share some of those.
Yeah, somewhat similar, actually. I think the biggest challenge for us was we took the decision a few days before government as well, for the well-being of our staff, to stop, because we run a lot of group sessions in prisons as well, where we're bringing groups of people together. I think we were only a couple of days ahead of when, or a week ahead of when we had to pull out anyway, but the abruptness of it was very difficult. And our model is we tend to do a group hero's journey workshop over 3 days, and then you have the one-to-one sessions after. And just the timing meant that a lot of people had done group sessions with us, and then that was it, and they went into lockdown. And so it was very, very difficult to have the communication and set up the one-to-one coaching on a good basis. And we can't do anything virtually. So it felt very abrupt. And I know the coaches, it's just very hard for them emotionally and mentally to suddenly feel they're completely cut off of contact with the young men that they've met and made a promise to, that they'd be back next week to meet them. And we were, they're young people, they're under 25, and it just felt very hard to feel like you're letting people down when actually it's out of our control. But I think that people found that very hard. And just the communication. So we've set up, email a prisoner, keeping in contact with people that way. But actually, strangely, all of the prisons we work in don't have the reply function. So they don't. Most prisons have the reply function. It just happens to be the 5 prisons we're in, none of them have the reply function. So we're sort of sending emails, feels like into the ether, without replies. But obviously I've noticed this morning on Twitter, prisons introducing the reply function who didn't previously have it. So I think prisons are responding, so we'll check back in with the prisons we work in and see if they have introduced that function. And we've set up an 0800 number so that people can call us free when they leave prison, and sending that message out. So we've kind of had to rapidly get used to new ways of working, but they're not ideal. They're not. We can't offer the same level of support that we would have done before. So that's probably our absolute biggest challenge, is just literally reaching the young men, establishing contact with as many as possible, helping them know how they can contact us on release, and keeping the coaching going in the community.
lack of the reply function seems quite crazy, doesn't it?
I don't understand it, but then I'm always trying to think, I kind of put myself in their shoes, in a governor's shoes, and the prison under such pressure that probably the staff time needed to do this. So I'm just, I think we'll take an approach of constructive, but it would be good if they could do this, if it's possible.
Yeah, of course. And Chris, what would you say have been your key greatest challenge or series of challenges?
I think the two challenges we've had was, the first one was the staff, because like Vicki, we took a view a few days before to actually start a consultation process with them, which was very difficult because we had to do it via Zoom, all 60 of them dialed in, and we were getting them to agree to going to work a 3-day week, paid and operating, so a 40% reduction, and that way I felt that we could sort of survive for quite a few months that way and protect everybody, but if we all took a hit together. But within 48 hours the furlough scheme came, so again, it's quite nice that you go back and say you had agreed to take a 40% cut, but actually what I'm saying is it's a 20% cut now, so that went quite well. But again, it's still quite a few ambiguities with regards to that furlough scheme. They tweaked it again yesterday with regards to start dates. I've got 2 people who I'd offered jobs to in January. They signed their contracts. They were due to start on the 1st of April, but because they weren't on the payroll, sadly they've left their last employer and they're in limbo now, waiting to start with us. We had to delay their start till, at the moment, it's July. And then the holiday side of things isn't clear yet either, because they changed the rules mainly for the key workers, so the ones working at the health service and prison service, to say that if they weren't able to take the holiday now, this entitlement, they could use it up over the next 2 years. Well, if we've had 2 or 3 months off, and then the whole team come back and still want their whole entitlement, that's going to be a detriment to the charity when it's trying to grow back up again. So we're talking to the government to get some clarity on that. So that's the first one. The second one is, so we should be pleased that the prison service have been releasing more people from prison. They've been releasing people in their last 4 months, I think, they're looking at the moment. So I think the prison population is down to 82,000 and something. So that's another 4,000 people have been released early over the last few weeks. But we've had quite a few of our men and women released a lot earlier that we weren't expecting. So again, Monday, Thursday, we had a few phone calls of trying quickly going and sorting out accommodation for them. And again, now we can't get them jobs. We've had a couple of ladies volunteer in the catering department at the Nightingale Hospital in Manchester, which is really good, and we're supporting them that way. But as I say, it's been learning to be a bit more reactive and also trying doing it remotely as well, which is what we're not about normally. We're about face-to-face, and as Vicki says, trust. If you say to somebody, I'll be there at 9 o'clock to meet you at the gate, we will always be there. But at the moment, we're going to say, we'll be there virtually, but you need to jump in an Uber and go to this address, and I've arranged for a voucher, or we've posted something to you. So it's, again, a very different way of working, but we still need to maintain those trust levels with our clients.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, you've all sort of remarked on what might be the learnings going forward for this. And I'm just wondering if we want to create some space to reflect on learnings around either sort of crisis management and how you've maybe structured teams and the systems and processes that allow you to respond with as much clarity as you can around taking next steps and decisions, or perhaps around the digitization of your access points to service users. I mean, what would you say some of the learnings are that are coming through? I'm wondering if we loop back to John to create that sense of turn taking, if that's helpful, or feel free to jump in if you'd rather.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think we touched on the use of Zoom earlier. As I mentioned, we've got 7 people in 7 different locations. Of course, what we can't do is use Zoom for the team when they're in prison, because that's not permitted. So you're very constrained. But what we can do is agree a more regular, whatever the time frame is. Let's say it's every other week. Get our project managers to work one day from home, or one part of the day from home, so that we can get together as a team virtually. We're all now comfortable using it, so I want us to keep on using it. Our normal way of operating is that every other month we physically get together, but that's actually quite inefficient. People travelling from Princeford up in Staffordshire, Wolverhampton, and East London, and we tend to congregate in the middle, which is where I'm based. It's nice and easy for me, but not necessarily for everyone else. Also, I think the in part of the recruitment process of our volunteers, which is quite time consuming for the project managers. Again, that's something that they can perhaps use Zoom as a technology for more efficiently going through the recruitment process. In terms of virtual support for our mentees, I think too early to say. We work with guys, many of whom have got so many challenges, and the idea of getting them onto a computer and doing a Zoom is probably too much for a lot of them. But let's explore where that can be, to particularly increase the support we can offer them post-release. I did touch earlier about that. Regardless of COVID-19, the focus of our work this year was always planned to be how can we do much more in the community afterwards.
Thanks, John. Yeah.
I think that the emerging learning is around our resilience and the other forms of communication. So I think we'd never want to, we always want to keep the face-to-face as much as possible, but actually probably should have had Email a Prisoner up and running as well anyway. And it's good that we've got it now. And I think I'm keeping a close eye on how many of our one-to-one coaching sessions are happening in the community virtually, because if that is working, that's something for us to explore long term, especially as a lot of the young people we work with are, and obviously not all, this isn't, some younger people are not digitally literate in the same way, but a lot of the young people we work with are very comfortable with smartphones. So we just need that variety of ways of contacting people, because I think, although we're going to get over this, there will be social distancing and types of ways we'll all have to work differently, probably for the next year to 2 years, and be mindful of things re-emerging. So I think having that resilience in the way that we engage with young men in prison, but particularly as they come out, I think we absolutely need. And it's good that we're getting that in place. I think I'm learning more about myself and the team. Actually, I'm amazed at how well the team quickly adapted to working from home very rapidly, and how quickly they were able to say, yeah, let's focus on this, let's do some program development. I think we've done quite. I'm quite proud of how the team have adapted so rapidly to new ways of working. But let's capitalise on that going forward and think about how we can do that better.
Thanks, Vicki. And Chris?
Good. I mean, I think communication's been the key thing with us, is because, as I say, we were all face-to-face. We've had our first trustees board meeting on Zoom. We've had a management team meeting on Zoom. And then we're trying to scale up a large project of the prison service. And we continued to have a meeting last week, which was great, on Skype Business. There was 8 of us on the call, and we're doing all the contracting for that. So in that sense, it's sort of, I always thought there's sort of meetings you had to be face to face, but actually we tried it on a phone call, it didn't work. But actually, when you can see people, I think it makes a big difference. So I think that's certainly something we we won't change from. We'll keep going with that route because it works really well. As I mentioned, we've got a couple of projects at the moment. We're launching Clink Gardens in Style. It's our third horticultural programme. I've got footings in for a glass house that should be built now, and I've got 4 half-finished polytunnels and lots of seedlings that are planted out that probably will have disappeared by the time we go back. So we'll have to pick up with that. And then we were just about to roll out a prison kitchens model. We'd be piloting it in 3 sites, and we'd offered quite a few jobs to people to come and ramp that up so we could be in 12 prisons by the end of the year. And that's obviously having a little bit of a detour, but we'll still remain focused to try and get that up and running if we can do.
Amazing. And with each of you, I'm just wondering if people are listening and they think, actually, how can we be involved? How can we be active in supporting your charities? Chris, I know you said there's a fund around supporting people during this period of time. I can share a link to that, alongside the post. Is there anything else, Vicki, John, that you'd like to share around how people could maybe support the charities during this time? What is your kind of call to action for people, would you say?
In terms of people supporting our charity or the sort of charitable sector generally?
Yeah, actually yours in particular. Is there any way, aside from the normal donating channels, that I can share as a link to sharing this?
Talk about on the donating side. That's not. We get very little in terms of donating. It's hard to get general public donating to our sector. I often say to people, when we're not children, we're not hearts, we're not cancer, and I don't mean this disrespectfully. We're not donkeys in Romania, or whatever. For the general public, if I was to go out and sort of rattle a tin, I'd quite likely get more abuse than support. So I think from a financial perspective, one has to be very targeted in securing support. As it stands, our funding is nearly all from grant-giving foundations and charities. And I have to say the response from them in recent days and weeks has been very positive. But it is a changing landscape because equally there are a number of it's an ongoing process. We never stop that process. And there's quite a number of charities who are quite rightfully saying, we are closing our door at the moment to new applications because we need to be focused on our existing grantees. And we have received some benefit from current funders, but equally we're having to defer applications that were already in process. So it's a balancing act. I think beyond all of this, again, it's seeing what are the opportunities that have been created out of this crisis because of a wider understanding and appreciation of the challenges that the charities face in their particular areas, whether it's our criminal justice sector or other ones, that we can tap into people who were beyond our reach beforehand. It's unknown, but there may be some future opportunities that wouldn't have arisen otherwise.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
I would say I hope that one thing that might come out of this is that people would more and more see the humanity of people in prison, because we're all facing this this enemy, I don't like that word, this virus together. And I just would hope that what comes out is a sense of the real humanity of people in prisons, that the things that they're worried about, and having to share cells and not seeing their family, and how hard that must be. And I would say this, it's not just about Spark Inside. I really strongly think there's a compelling case for the public to donate to organisations that go into prisons and offer hope and practical support, be it mentoring or coaching, that when we get back in, and I say when, not if, because I'm a real optimist, when we get back in, people that we'll be meeting will have been locked in their cells 23 hours a day and have had very, very little, some of them have had very, very little engagement. And I really believe that the work the sector does will be more important than ever. So I really do think there is a compelling case. And that's not just about Spark Inside, that's about many charities that do great work. So I hope that we can make that case to foundations, but also to the public. And we will try. But if, people would love, obviously I'd be thrilled if people wanted to look at our website and donate. But more importantly, engage in that public debate that's on Twitter and in the media about people in prison who are people and have the same concerns and worries as we do in this time, probably more so actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned already we set up this fund for our graduates. Yes, it's vital, and the longer it goes on, we're going to need more funds for that, so people can really help and support in that way. But I think the other thing we've been looking at is our social media platform and our newsletters, and it's more about building a sense of community. So whereas we would go out and say, book now to come for lunch to change someone's life or give them a job, we feel that really we need to be keeping our name out there and giving them real life stories about what's happening with our graduates, but also at the same time supporting and encouraging those who are working. So today on our social media you'll see going out, we're not just clapping for the NHS today, we're clapping for the prison staff as well, and try and support and encourage those other key workers out there, because it's not about us, we're all in it together. Also we do things like this, the four of us, to actually find the time to sit and talk. That just wouldn't normally happen. Well, I say it wouldn't in my diary, because there'd always be some sort of bushfire erupting somewhere that needs putting out, or a busy diary. So I think we're learning a lot from it. But I think we've had quite a few sort of just random checks or letters of encouragement coming in the post the last few days that we have occasionally, but not in this volume. So it's really nice that everyone's focusing on the cause, really.
Absolutely, thanks, Chris. And I also want to come back to what Vicki was saying around, we're talking, or some people are talking as though they are prisoners in their own home, particularly those that are more vulnerable health-wise, have to be fully isolated and taking deliveries. And that sense of empathy that could be growing around what it is to be isolated, and the relativity to that of the young men and women that are in prison that you guys are supporting in terms of service users, that can be drawn together more obviously, I think, to help people appreciate the lack of human connection and how punishing that can be, in our sense of self and how we exist in the world. So I think that's a really interesting one. I'm going to think more about that, and I'd love to pick up with you individually after, just thinking about how Flux might be able to support you more around particularly some of the kind of post-release offer sort of ideas. John and Vicki, you started to talk about, because I'm really focused on, with Flux, being able to mobilise the entrepreneurial creative thinking of young men and women in prisons, not necessarily just young, but I know that Spark Inside and Trailblazers both offering that space for younger people, because the lack of access to jobs and income is so dramatically a problem for them, that actually if they were to develop a business idea and to access some funding around starting something off that they could feel they have ownership over and could really apply that entrepreneurial thinking to, I think that could be something really exciting. And equally sort of continuing to help campaign around banning the box and supporting employers really to shift away from that sense of stigma and stereotyping is really important for me personally. But lots of things came out of that for me. I'm really thrilled that you offered your generosity of time, and I hope that you access some ideas and empathy from each other. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything more you want to share. You have each other's contacts, so you can kind of pick up individually from here.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. Thank you for setting this. Sorry, not Vicki, Lucy, for hosting it and bringing us together. Much appreciated.
Thank you. It was such a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Lucy. Yeah.
Enjoy
Good luck,
the day.
everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Good luck,
Good
everyone.
week.
Take care.
Thanks very much. Bye.